Sup nerds! So instead of showing you the stuff that I collect or a review of a specific game in which I collect things, I figured we could have a little talk. More like a rambling, but I just wanted to talk about the future of this channel. It's something I figured I would have to talk about eventually, but that I kept putting it off in my head because I get social anxiety from just imagining having a conversation or dealing with my crap. But I think it's got to that point where I do have to make some changes for maybe the growth of this channel and my own personal one as well, perhaps even for my mental sanity. And yeah, if you look back to my older videos, we did go through several changes here before, but most of that was from when I was not monetized and literally only like 3 of you used to watch my stuff, so I just used to do whatever I wanted without letting anyone know what the plan was. And yeah, that might sound kind of funny to some of you because my channel still isn't that big, and according to the analytics, there still aren't that many people watching my stuff, at least not in a frequent way. But still, after this give or take a year or so of being monetized, I do feel like I have a sort of responsibility to this channel and to the few viewers that come by to watch my stuff. Thank you, by the way. Now, it's nothing terrible. I'm not confessing to always being a serial killer or anything like that, at least not officially anyway. No, but really, it's just about me wanting, or rather needing, to change the focus a little. Or a lot, depending on how you look at it. But it's not like I'm giving up game-related videos for good, at least not yet. It's just a bit of a change in pace, perhaps. And I guess I wanted to tell you a bit about my life, just so you know where I'm coming from with all this. And perhaps this will serve as a warning to any young adults getting into adult life. Don't mind the background, it's just recording that I had on hand because I didn't really know what to put in the background. But ever since I was a kid, I loved stories and I loved art. If you pick up any of my notebooks from school from any grade and any subject, you could find a ton of doodles and sketches. And everything that I've ever drew, no matter how simple the drawing was, I always came up with a background story to it. In any given recess or lunchtime, you could see me sitting in the quiet corner, reading a book or doodling my free time away. That's just who I was. I didn't care about sports, I didn't care about running around and screaming with the other kids. All I wanted was to get lost in the books that I was reading or making up my own worlds through my art and stories that I made up. That said, I did move schools quite a bit, and that means that I was in senior year in high school with teachers that didn't really know me, so they didn't really know how to help my journey into young adulthood. So when my art teacher told me, "Hey, young bucket, you have something special there. Have you considered going to art school? If you'd like, I can help you put together a portfolio so you can apply." I think it's safe to say that any kid with 2 working neurons at that point could see what a God-given opportunity that was. Here was this teacher that didn't know anything about me at all, who recognized a passion for art and was willing to help me make art part of my adult life. I said no. You see, I was an ambitious kid. And though reality is very different now, at that time, artists were, for the most part, very hardworking and very poor. Everyone around me and people on TV, people in books, they all said the same thing, that art should only be considered for a career if you are okay with being hungry. So in my head, no matter how passionate I was about art, art was just a hobby, but that I would need an actual career. Not only that, but I wanted to change the world. That's right. Any ambitious kid from back then wanted to change the world. I wasn't special, but sure as heck was gonna try my best at it. And so I went to college as a biochemistry major. I know, very different from art. And exactly a year after that, on one of the countless mornings where I walked back from the lab after not having slept at all that night, I realized I don't ever want to be in a lab. I don't care about any of that. And to my credit, I decided right then and there that I was going to change my major. At the very least, you can't accuse me of undecisiveness. Any college kid with 2 working neurons would probably have taken this opportunity to change their majors into something they were always passionate about, like art or writing, right? I changed my major to psychology because I was gonna change the world. I was gonna learn more about the human psyche and unlock discoveries about our most complex possession and being, our brain. But it was through psychology that I learned that I didn't like people, period. We were all so easily manipulated and it isn't even our fault. That's just how we were wired, and there were already so many corporations taking advantage of that. So yeah, I didn't like how vulnerable we could be. I didn't know how ruthless other people could be with us or vice versa. So any young adult thinking about their future with at least 2 working neurons would probably have taken this opportunity to change their majors again into something they were passionate about, right? I stuck to psychology. I didn't want to seem undecisive, and I figured a diploma in psychology could be useful down the line. So that is what I graduated in, and have never again used my diploma for anything else. After that, however, I did come around to the idea of studying art, because that whole time I was in college, I never stopped coming up with my own stories and worlds, and even doodling in class. Eventually, after college, I found myself realizing there's only so much I can teach myself in regards to art, so I applied to an art school. But as everyone knows, life is full of curveballs. Some unfortunate circumstances befell my family at the time, and we found ourselves needing money. I don't know if it's still like that, but back then, international students could not have a paying job while on a student visa in the States. And so, there would be no way for me to pay for art school. Not to mention, I still needed to pay for my college debt. So I decided to stay in Brazil and work. And something kids don't often know is how tough it is to actually get a job that isn't minimum wage. And that no matter how high your self-esteem is, how devastating it can be to get one rejection after another. And that puts you in a vulnerable spot. It makes you consider settling for things that at one point you thought was beneath you. And finally, when a company did hire me, it was a big international co-op, and I was specifically hired to facilitate communication between the 2 international parties. At least that's what it was in the contract anyway. But once I got hired, I gave my all to this job. I worked harder than most because initially I was very thankful that they hired me where so many others have rejected me. And well, I could get into the nitty-gritty of the pure hell that corporate jobs are when there are other people actively trying to sabotage you, but that's not the point of the message. The point is, independent of what others did or did not, my sight of my goals somehow got lost in the middle of all that. The original plan, when I got into that company, was to work 1 or 2 years to be able to pay my debts, save up a little, and get out. Go back to trying to do what I wanted. But between giving 110% to this job, leaving the house at 5 AM and coming back at 9 PM every day and working even on weekends, add to that the economy of this country going down the gutter, so me needing to work longer than I had calculated in order to pay my debts from overseas, all that focusing on working just became who I was. Wake up, go to work, stress out, come back, sleep 6 hours or less, wake up, go to work. And just repeat that for years and years. And at some point, I forgot what I was doing all that for. I forgot that I wanted to get out of the country. I simply didn't think of it. And that might sound silly to some of you, but even now, my memory of those years are all jumbled together and hazy. Because it was like I was in autopilot. Because I was so stressed if I thought about it, my defense mechanism was to just not think about it. Just keep working and hope that one day it was going to get better. Well, it didn't. After around 4 years, I was able to pay my debt, but by then I had forgotten what it is that I wanted or what the plan was originally. I just kept working, saving up some, and then spending on Pokemon cards to cope with my life. And this was before Logan Paul bought a bunch of cards and increased the prices everywhere. So back then, not that many people really cared about Pokemon cards like they do now. Then one day, someone who was very dear to me back in college reached out for a chance and asked me if I still drew, if I still made stories for those drawings. And no joke, that was the first time in years that I realized I used to draw and tell my own little stories. That and subsequent issues with my health due to stress on the job, I decided to quit. I tried to get something lined up before quitting, but nothing panned out. And I couldn't stand another minute being there, so I quit. I decided I was gonna tell my own stories. So I wrote 2 books, self-published on Amazon, several short stories for a site that never really had the intention of paying me, and a fanfiction on Wattpad. Funnily enough, the fanfiction is what did best in terms of views, but we all know that you can't get paid with fanfiction. And it took me a little over a year to write each book. So during those 2 to 3 years, I was just sustaining myself with the money that I had saved up from my previous job. And seeing that start to deplete, pretty quickly, I turned to YouTube between my writings, doing Pokemon card openings and then eventually Beyblades, most of the stuff which I had already purchased while I was working and was keeping sealed. But of course, like I said, it was before any of that was really that popular, so none of that really took off. I then turned to streaming on Twitch.
No, I was so close, so close.
Oh, I'm losing my patience. I want to kick this guy in the balls. And I was able to monetize Twitch while streaming Monster Hunter Stories, the first one for the 3DS. And that was cool and all, but like I said, I don't really enjoy human interaction. So I was streaming at least 2 hours every day, because one day after streaming, I had to recharge my mental and social battery. I literally slept for like 12 hours. It was draining, but despite that, we did beat a few games over there. Of course, it never really took off, and then eventually I stopped because I realized it was taking a lot of my time and effort from writing. So I just stuck to YouTube on the side while I was continuing to write my stories away, and then I ran out of the sealed products to unbox. And so I turned to making videos of video games, because of course as a gamer I did have a lot of games, and I wanted to make some content in which I didn't need to spend money. First was PUBG stuff, because I really do enjoy PUBG even today. But I'm not particularly spectacular at it, nor am I really funny, so you can guess that it didn't take off either. And when my savings really started to deplete, I turned to what I do now, making collection videos of stuff in games. And thankfully, that worked out. I was lucky enough to have Fallout TV show coincide with the time that I was making Fallout 76 collection videos, and that's how I monetized this channel. I did get quite a bit of views from the hype, and that money coming in, even though it was just a fraction of what I used to make at my previous job, it really felt good. I was finally making money with my own hands, and because of that, I will be forever grateful to Fallout 76. But as we all know, the hype died pretty quickly and so did the views. I tried to branch out to different games while I was still focusing on Fallout videos, and as you can tell from that previous sentence, somewhere along the way my writing took a back seat. I wasn't making much or any money with my writing, and so I focused on what I could make money in that moment. But I didn't want to be in a situation where I no longer had any content for Fallout 76 and not have anything else ready to go. So while still making collection videos for Fallout, I kept playing several other games to try and get to that point where I could show different collections for those games as well. And that took a lot of time, and still, some games worked out and some didn't. None really reached the interest that Fallout did, and now that the views have really gone down and what I was fearing for had arrived, I no longer had that much content I could make on Fallout aside from updating the collection videos that I had already made when another update for Fallout 76 brought more items for those categories. And more often than not, we don't get a lot of collectible stuff in those updates. And still, I have not found a second main game, which is not for lack of playing. I did play a ton of games for a lot of hours, but mostly I focused on the wrong games for a while. I did focus on New World for a few years, and that's an MMO that, unlike most MMOs, forces you to play together with other people. If you don't, then there's no way to collect the cool stuff. And if you've been paying any attention, I don't do well with human interaction, so I ended up not being able to collect too much stuff on there. Everything is also heavily RNG dependent, so in the few occasions that I did get enough people to make a party to go after this stuff, we would run expeditions the whole day, grind the PvP stuff the next day, and just never get some of the items that I was still missing. And then of course the devs decided not to update the game for like 8 months or so, just to bring the game to consoles without doing anything new for the end game. So it was around 500 hours that I put into it without much return. I did make a review video, and then a mount video, and a fashion video, but still at the time it didn't garner much views, nor was I able to make the collection video that I really wanted, which was all the artifacts at the time. It just kept piling on more and more artifacts every season, while making the RNG so scruffed that I never saw some of the artifacts, despite having played 500 hours of this game, grinding away at those same activities day in and day out. And that frustrated me to the point where I quit the game. And there are some other games in which similar things have happened. Some games were really hyped at the moment that I started to play, which lost the hype eventually, or that made me realize there wasn't much to collect to show in the game to begin with. So a lot of those have stacked up and gotten me here. Hi, my name is NerdBucket, and I don't have a lot of content to go on. There were even a few months that I wasn't able to hit the $100 mark to get paid, and I know $100 is not a lot to begin with, definitely not enough to live by, but it did help, of course. So when I couldn't make that $100 mark, it really hurt, and I had to make do here and there. Thankfully, I had some friends who have helped me greatly in some of those times, and thankfully there were people willing to buy some of my stuff in my collection. So somehow I made it this far. And it's always when I'm nearing rock bottom mentally that I realize I'm no longer drawing nor making stories of my own. That was my goal when I quit the job. And still somehow I lost sight of it again. Maybe I really don't have two working neurons, who knows? But the thing is, I don't want to just draw and tell stories. This time I want to animate. Animation was something that I've always been interested in, but I never knew nor learned how to do so. Bored my time with work, with writing, with streaming and YouTube, and so many years have passed, and I'm no longer that young man who wanted to go to an art school. People call me Mr. and Sir now. Just the other day, I made a funny face to a kid in the supermarket, and their mom asked me if I had kids of my own. Time really goes by mercilessly fast, and as a young adult, you might think you know what that means, but you really don't. It gets everyone by surprise, I promise you. But all that time that I spent doing other stuff, had I just focused and tried my hand at animation while I still had money saved up, then in all these years, I probably would have at least learned how and have been better at it than I am right now. But of course, life gets in the way. Work, stress, COVID, depression, and money. Always money. And I'm not trying to make any excuses. I was the one who have made all of those decisions. Were the circumstances crappy? Yes. But it really was me that made all of those decisions. No one had a gun to my head. I just did what I thought was best at the moment, and I just didn't realize how much each of those decisions would take over my life. And now I'm sitting here, not having made $100 in yet another month, and wondering, why wasn't I drawing and making my own worlds? I mean, I did for a while. I quit my job for it, and I wrote a lot, I did. I just didn't keep up and persist once money was dwindled in front of my face again. And you know what they say, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is right now. And I'm sure you're all able to see where I'm going with this. And don't get me wrong, I love playing games. I love gaming, and I love collecting stuff in games. And I'm not just gonna give that up from one day to another. There will probably be a few more game videos along the way, when there's updates and whatnot, the occasional review of a game I beat, you know? But I do want to go back to drawing and telling my stories. I want to learn to animate. The craving, the need is still there. Of course, it is important to note that currently I have absolutely zero knowledge on animation. And I just like to draw and make stories, so the first few videos that I do make regarding this will most likely just be in a comic format mostly, I think. Static images, zooming in, zooming out maybe. And slowly as I learn how, we'll start towards making my own 2D animations, my own cartoons if you will. And of course, my being a huge nerd, there will be some fan animations there. Not everything of course, but some definitely. There are a lot of universes that I'm a huge fan of, so the story and some, if not most of the characters will be original, that is just set in those universes made by other people. And of course, there will be stuff that will be 100% my own, with my own universes. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm old now, my drawing skills are a little rusty, imposter syndrome is the highest it has ever been, and again, zero knowledge in animation, but I'm gonna try. Do I have the money to sustain myself if this doesn't work? Nope, I don't. But if I am going to starve, then it's somewhat consoling to know that now I am that struggling artist that my high school self said no to, you know? It's somehow ironic and poetic even. But also, if this works out, then it will be a great story to tell one day. And if it doesn't, well, then let this be a lesson to all young adults. Do not let time pass you by, because it will. Focus on the stuff you love, focus on the stuff that you are passionate about. If people around you recognize a talent and a passion in you, then please don't ignore them. Please. Maybe there really is something there. And honestly, I'm afraid that if I lose sight of this again, then the next time, it might be too late. So yeah, let's see how this goes and hope for the best. This is Nerd Bucket, and remember, do what you're passionate about. Always nerd on.